Just in time for the start of school, there is a COVID surge happening. There's also a new subvariant called Eris. Is this something that we should be concerned about? Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, it's Dr. David. So, whenever our kids are heading back to school and they've been away for the summer, they've been picking up new germs at camp and all over, it's invariable that the first 2 to 4 weeks of school that they start bringing stuff home, they get sick. It's kind of a rite of passage to get sick during the first month of school. All the teachers then get it. It's a lovely time of year. It often happens after winter break too, again, because we're sharing germs with our family and we've traveled and all that type of stuff. So, it's the time. It's the time where we'll start to see that again. Now, in particular with COVID, as I had mentioned, there is this surge that is going on right now. It's not anything like the surges that we've seen in the past. It's more of a bump. If you look at the curve where we had been seeing these spikes during time, and now it's kind of like a little bit like this. So it is up above, but maybe the term surge is even too strong of a term, although it's certainly being portrayed in the media that way. I'm going to call it a bump, actually. So here, we officially called it a bump, not a surge. Now, that's not to say we may not be in a surge situation 2 to 4 weeks from now because of the spread of the way the virus goes, but at least that's what we're seeing right now. Okay, now, we've talked about before that we are in the endemic phase of SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus, COVID-19. And with that, we've always talked about how there's these new variants that were popping up. We went from the original to beta to delta to Omicron and all of those. And those were very significant, those variants from one to the other. But then we also started having subvariants, and especially in the age of Omicron, where we had BA1, BA2, XBB, etc. Now, this newest one called Eris, this is a descendant of Omicron, but it's called EG.5.1. Got to make sure I got that right, because why would I remember that? That seems pretty random. Okay, but it is, as I said, it is a subvariant of Omicron, which does mean a few things. Almost everybody has had Omicron at this point, and we've been on Omicron since November of 2021, so it's almost 2 years. So most people have had exposure to it. So that's the reason why, all of the information we have so far shows it is not more dangerous to people overall. In fact, maybe, we've learned as it's gotten, although more contagious, it's becoming less dangerous. And especially for children, we know almost universally that it's not dangerous. We've kind of known that from day one when it comes to COVID. And one of the earliest things we learned, for whatever reason, kids didn't get as sick like they would with the flu compared to adults. Okay, now, because of all of this, it is certainly good. And maybe we see another variant, not subvariant at some point, that could upset the apple cart all over again? I guess it's possible, but the fact that we are now almost 2 years into Omicron, certainly the longer we go without a new variant, the less likely we're going to see one, because everybody's just kind of like settled in. That's part of the endemic versus the pandemic, type of situation, okay? And now, not just for kids, but it does seem as if this new variant, which is about 17.4% of all COVID cases in America, so they are still testing that, but at the same time, they're not, it's not that much of a concern anymore. The U.S. government's not even tracking deaths. There's really only a handful of deaths that's happening from COVID on a regular basis. Now, no, of course, if there's a bump, we may see a little bit more of that, but there's no reason to suspect that we will be seeing the same types of death and serious morbidity that we were seeing, back in 2020. Okay, so the CDC itself is not even calling this. It's a variant of interest, not a variant of concern. Okay, so that lets you know how the authorities, how concerned are you about this when something would pop up and may turn into a variant of concern. But the last few that's come through, it hasn't happened, and there's no reason to suspect that there will be a significant concern. But what's happened with this subvariant, I should say, is there's always a change in the genetic code, usually of the spike virus, that allows it to get into into cells better through those ACE receptors that we've talked about. And of course, that means more immune escape, because if the antibodies that we have in our body are against the spike protein, and there's been a change in the protein sequencing of the spike, then it will not be as recognized by the immune system, even if we have previous immunity for it. Okay, so 96% of all people in America have immunity. Okay, whether it's through vaccine, whether it's through the virus itself, hybrid immunity that we've talked about as well. So again, if most people have protection, that's also the reason why it's not as damaging to people as well. But still, we shouldn't forget that myocarditis can still happen from COVID. It still does happen. Okay. Also, long COVID, which is something that even if a person has a mild case of COVID, they could still go on to long-term COVID, whether it's long-term myocarditis, long-term brain fog, the loss of smell, the fatigue, the muscle aches, and there are people who still are having those things very long-term. So we are not really protected, and we still don't know who those people are. I suspect there's a genetic predisposition. I strongly suspect that, as we've always talked about in our prevention mode of having good vitamin D and zinc levels, and also doing the COVID immune support protocol. I know we've shared it on the site previously for our patients. It's in the useful info section of the patient portal for our Patreon members, and please join us over there if you want to have access to our primary care protocols, but it's there for our Patreon members as well. Okay, so in terms of my take, overall, if you're concerned, take precautions. Of course, there's still the potential of passing it along to an older person, to passing along to an immunocompromised person who may have more of a difficult time than maybe anybody in your direct household. But again, exposure is still there. And of course, the more we can do to protect ourselves, the better. So, hope you learned something new. And as we get into the new school season, I hope everybody is having will have a good start to the year, and that we can stay as healthy as possible. Have a nice day.